everyone and welcome to another video on the Ordinary Boy Boxing channel. Now in today's video it's my review of the fight that happened just last night, so the 21st of January 2023 between Chris Eubank Jr and Liam Smith. The fight went down at the Manchester Arena. It was shown on Sky Sports Box Office in the UK and on DAZN everywhere else in the world. Going into the fight, Chris Eubank Jr was 32 wins, 2 losses and 0 draws with 23 KOs. Fighting Liam Smith, who was 32 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw with 19 KOs. Going into the fight, the previous 3 for both men. So Eubank had fought Marcus Morrison, who he beat by unanimous decision. He then fought Wanik Awalijan, who he beat by, who he retired in his corner in round 5, and then obviously he fought Liam Williams last, who he beat by unanimous decision. Going on to Liam Smith, his last 3 he beat Anthony Fowler by TKO in round 8. He fought Jesse Vargas, who he beat by TKO in round 10, and he fought Hassan Mwakio, I probably said that wrong, but he beat him by TKO in round 4. So going into the fight, Eubank Jr was a favourite. The bookies were picking Eubank Jr to win over Smith. The prevailing opinion of people was that Eubank Jr would could knock him out or win on points in a close, if it went the distance, or it could be close, and the only way Smith was going to win was on points. Before the fight, I did do a little poll on the channel. I asked you guys who you were picking between Chris Eubank Jr and Liam Smith. The results were 64% of you were picking Chris Eubank Jr to win, and 36% of you were picking Liam Smith to win. So, going into the fight, fantastic atmosphere. I thought the card was actually really good. Do I think it should be pay-per-view? No, but there's not a lot of fights I do think should be pay-per-view. But in the grand scheme of all the fights we've had that have been pay-per-view and are pay-per-view, I don't think it was a bad card at all. I thought the undercard was really good as well. But we're talking about the main event. So going into the main event, both men had their entrance. They both looked really good. Smith was obviously the fan favourite here, as we knew he would be. Eubank Jr going into a very hostile atmosphere. It reminded me, his entrance and the reception he got, I got flashbacks to his dad, Chris Eubank Sr, from the kind of the receptions he used to get. So yeah, they both had their entrances and round 1 began. So into round 1, it was quite a slow start, I felt. Eubank was using his jab really well. I was impressed actually with Chris Eubank's jab in this fight. But Smith was able to time Eubank and catch him on several occasions in this first round. Which, you know, fighters have done before, but for Smith to be able to time Eubank so quickly was kind of a sign that, you know, Eubank was going to have a tough fight. Aside from Eubank's jab, which was landing very well, when he was going for hooks or kind of any other punch, they were missing wildly in this first round. And Smith was having a lot of success when he was backing Eubank into the corner or on the ropes. That's when he was able to land and hurt Eubank. I was quite surprised actually the effects already in round 1 that Smith's punches were having on Chris Eubank Jr. So in round 1, for me, Eubank I've not looked at the stats, but Eubank Jr probably landed the more punches with the jabs. But I am giving this round to Smith because he had the more effective punches. So for me, round 1 is a 10-9 to Liam Smith. Going on to round 2 then, a better pace and movement here from Eubank. He came out, Roy Jones had a word with him and he come out with a lot more snap in his punches. He was able, for the first minute or so of this round, able to pot shot Smith just with a jab and his movement. Yeah, and a not great defence from Chris Eubank Jr again. Surprising me not only how much Smith's punches were affecting Eubank, but how easy they were getting in. Again, when you're watching the fight, you're reminded again, as I said in my preview, that Chris Eubank Jr is not the greatest boxer. And, you know, I think I think in his previous fights, he's able to either use his head movement to get away from the punches of his opponent, or even when he's caught, his chin is so good that they don't really affect him. But this wasn't happening in this fight. Chris Eubank's chin was not holding up how we all thought it would against Smith. And also, Smith, I felt had prepared well for this fight. So whenever Eubank Jr. whenever Smith started with a flurry of punches and Eubank Jr. was doing all the movement, most fighters in the past either do one or two things. They step off him because they don't want to be countered, or they throw wildly and miss. But what Smith did is he prepared for this. He'd obviously watched tape on Eubank Jr. So when Eubank Jr. was doing all this, Smith didn't move away. He stayed exactly where he was, and he was very patient, and then he was able to catch him. So I edged round 2 just to Chris Eubank Jr. in the end, just on punches landed, but I can see why people would have it either way. The round does end with Eubank caught in the corner. Luckily the bell does ring, so Smith isn't able to unload as much as he probably wanted to. So yeah, I do give just round 2 to Chris Eubank Jr. On to round 3, quite a messy start to this round. Lots of clinching from both men, and wild misses again from Chris Eubank Jr. The jab again working well for Chris Eubank Jr. As I said, I was impressed with that in the fight. Good end to the round from Chris Eubank. Smith made the mistake of standing still, which you should never do with Eubank Jr. because as soon as he stood still, Eubank Jr. was able to just absolutely unload with the uppercuts, and he landed quite a few towards the end of the round, and that won him round 3 for me. It was quite a close round up until that point, but that ended to round 3, won it quite clear. So that's a 10-9 in round 3 to Chris Eubank Jr. On to round 4. The round started with Smith pressuring Eubank with his feet, so he wasn't really throwing any punches. Eubank Jr. was throwing them all, but Smith just walking him down. He'd already knew from those first 3 rounds, if I get him up against ropes or get him in the corner, that is my chance to unload. And unload he did. He did get him in the corner, he unloads. As I said earlier, Eubank Jr. trying to move, Smith not backing away and not throwing wildly, just watching Eubank Jr., watching what he's doing, and then managed to catch Eubank Jr. with 2 or 3 very hard punches and 1 punch that sent Eubank Jr. to the canvas for the first time in his career. So yeah, he caught him. Eubank got up, but his feet were absolutely all over the place. He didn't seem to know where he was. I would not have been surprised if the referee had called it there, but I understand that it's a very big fight, a much anticipated fight, a pay-per-view fight. So he's up, so the referee does let it continue, but of course, a few more punches later, Eubank Jr. is back down. He gets up again, but the referee just waves it because he's completely out of it. Eubank Jr. was so out of it that even when the referee had done that, he tried to carry. I think he thought the fight was still going on. He was still trying to box with Smith, but obviously the fight had finished. So yeah, Smith wins the fight by TKO in round 4. Really good performance from Smith, and you know, the build-up got quite nasty towards the end, so I'd imagine it was quite a satisfying win for Smith as well. So no one won the Ordinary Boy Cup. It will roll over to the next competition. A shout out though to one of the followers, SK from Kent. He was the nearest. He picked Smith by knockout in round 10, and it obviously happened in round 4. He was the only one who predicted Smith to win. Everyone else was giving me Eubank. So shout out to SK from Kent. You were the closest there. Some notes from the fight. As I said, fantastic atmosphere. Really was. I did think about getting tickets to this fight, and when I saw the atmosphere, the part of me wished I had. But Manchester's just a bit too far for me, and especially, I mean, I think the main event didn't happen until 11 PM UK time, so that would have been a really late night, and trying to get back would have been a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, fantastic atmosphere. A lot of people there. Obviously, I saw Tyson Fury on front row, probably there to support Joseph Parker, but I think he stayed for the main event. Our old mate David Hay was there. Yeah, so and there was others. It was a bit of a. It was a a highly anticipated fight. Yeah, the entrance, Smith absolutely cheered to high heaven, and Eubank with a hostile entrance from the crowd. Throughout the fight, what there was of it, the 4 rounds, really poor defence from Chris Eubank Jr. As I said earlier, and as I said in my preview and my quick pick, sorry, that his defence has never been amazing. He's never been a good boxer. We saw that with Billy Joe Saunders, and we saw that with George Groves. But what he's, as I said, what he's been able to do in the past is either rely on his chin to get him through, or rely on his head movement, because the opponents usually back off because they think they're going to get countered. Smith did neither, and his chin did not hold up. Which is interesting because Smith is not known for his knockouts. He's not a big knockout artist. If Eubank Jr had won, he was on about fighting Triple G. Can you imagine what Triple G would have done to him? Also, I did a video about what would have happened if Eubank Jr and Conor Benn would have fought, and I picked Conor Benn to win. I got a bit of stick for that. I think what happened in that fight shows what Conor Benn would have done. Eubank Jr quite tight at the weight at 160. He was fighting Conor Benn a few pounds under that, so yeah, it wouldn't have gone well. Eubank was very humble after, but he did say after that he felt the referee stopped it too soon. Obviously he didn't. In my opinion, if anything, the referee let it carry on a bit too long. There was no way Eubank Jr was going to win. Eubank Jr kind of, I don't know about you, but I'm getting vibes of David Haye from Chris Eubank Jr. A lot of talk, a lot of bravado, a lot of social media, a lot of red carpets, a lot of photographs, a lot of bling, but not the consistency and the skill to go with it. Now, I know David Haye was a world champion, and Eubank Jr I suppose technically has been. He'd held some title, but they're very much, there's not enough substance about them and not enough skill to kind of go with their bravado. But, you know, they sell themselves well. So where does each man go next? Well, so for Smith, we'll start with Smith, who won. Before the fight, obviously Golovkin had been mentioned by Eubank, so you know Smith could go after Golovkin if he really wanted to. I can't see that happening, but he could. Kell Brook was on about coming out of retirement to fight Eubank if he won, so presumably Kell Brook Smith could happen. Eubank Jr is Smith is contractually obliged to give Chris Eubank Jr a rematch should he want it. That was in the contract. I don't know if I see that fight going any different if there is a rematch, to be perfectly honest. So going on to Eubank, obviously as I said he could take that rematch. I would advise him against doing that. I don't like being one of these people that as soon as a fighter loses you say they should retire. But it's clear that he's not world class. He's at the top of the British level, but he's not world class. When he's needed to win the big fights, he's lost them. And this was another example of it. If Chris Eubank Jr doesn't retire, there's only 2 fights that I think he should consider. One of them is Billy Joe Saunders. Billy Joe Saunders has not fought since the Canelo fight. He's been inactive for all that time. He's fluctuated in weight throughout his career. He's never ever been a massive knockout puncher. So you could fancy your chances with him, because at most you're probably going to get outboxed. Or take that Conor Benn fight a weight you're comfortable with. Again, you're going to be fighting a much naturally lighter man who is now not on steroids. So, yeah, you'd have a chance of winning that if you pick the weight you want. But aside from them two, I don't know who you put Eubank Jr in with, who's a big name, if you're on his team. I think he will take that rematch with Liam Smith. I think he's a proud man, but I can only see it being the same result. There's not many fights I can think of where the rematch is completely different from the first fight. And I think, you know, this wasn't a close points decision from Smith. This wasn't a dodgy referee stoppage. Chris Eubank Jr. got demolished. That's just the fact of it. So yeah, that is that was Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Smith. Let me know in the comments below if you watched the fight and what you thought of it. Did you think Smith was going to win but you hadn't put it on, or were you shocked that Smith knocked down Chris Eubank Jr. and finished him for the first time in Chris Eubank Jr.'s career? Let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, then please do subscribe. I do lots of videos like this and quick predictions and loads of different videos about whatever's going on in boxing. So if you're not a subscriber, please click that subscribe button, and if you've liked this video, give it a like. Until next time, I shall see you in the next video.